That is one big pile of shit. This could be it. We may be in some multiverse where I don't even exist.
Don't knock rationalization. Where would we be without it?
Yes, without the use. To take them out, take them down, do your stuff. Life finds a way.
Hello and welcome to episode 6 of The Complete Works, a deep dive into the career and films of actor Jeff Goldblum. My name is Mike Smith, and joining me on this journey into the wondrous world of Goldblum is my friend, co-host, and fellow Goldblum maniac,
Mike DeCriscio.
How you doing today, Mike?
I'm doing great. Coming to you live from quarantine week 2. Things are going great. How are you?
Pretty good. You know, it's pretty much the same thing here, quarantine stuff. I am getting to leave the house to go to work because, again, I work at the radio station. We got to do it in the studio. You have not left the house in like 2 weeks, right?
Yeah. I am lucky enough to be able to work from home. So why even go outside ever, you know?
Yeah, fair enough. So also wanted to mention out there that last episode, I did say that it was episode 4 of The Complete Works, when in actuality it was episode 5. And that's because Mike made me do this thing where at the beginning of the podcast, we start saying the number of the episodes, and I forgot to update it for that week. So that was episode 5. This is episode 6. Just throwing it out there.
The record's been set.
Exactly. A whoops upside your head. That was a reference to a podcast that does not exist anymore. And now I'm choking on my water.
I'm glad that your own reference tripped you up so much. Good job, Mike. You're a professional talk person. You're good.
Exactly. I'm doing too much of that lately. But and the podcast I'm talking about was 80s All Over, which was a great podcast about 80s movies that does not exist anymore, and that's a shame. But anyway, this podcast does exist.
That's right.
The Complete Works, where we're talking about every Jeff Goldblum movie. And on our first episode of this podcast, we talked about Jeff Goldblum's very first role as a young street punk in the 1970s Charles Bronson thriller named Freak Number 1. And this time around, we'll be talking about a very different Jeff Goldblum role as a young street punk in a 1970s Charles Bronson thriller, this time named Hood Number 3.
Oh, he got downgraded.
Yeah, he did, which is a shame. You know, I guess he and Bronson got together, and Bronson was like, no, you're demoted. And that was it. But between these two roles, and his role in Special Delivery as the motorcycle gang member Snake, and his role in Next Stop Greenwich Village, where he plays an actor trying out for a tough guy part, the movie we're talking about today only reinforces the notion that we talked about last week, that Jeff Goldblum was the preeminent punk tough guy of his day.
I mean, look at him. What an intimidating figure he is.
Right, truly the Jason Statham of the 1970s, I believe is what we said in that episode.
That's right.
But let's talk about Charles Bronson for a minute, though. I mean, here was a guy who fought in World War II, and pretty much right when the war was over, he joined a theater troupe in Philadelphia. He got into movies in the 50s, quickly became one of those screen tough guys, and then he really exploded in the 60s when he was a scene-stealing part of the ensemble from movies like The Magnificent Seven, The Great Escape, The Dirty Dozen, and Once Upon a Time in the West. And from there, in the 70s and 80s, Bronson starred in a string of solo vehicles, usually action or revenge thrillers, with the centerpiece being the Death Wish franchise. And this is probably the period of his career that he's best known for. Kind of a later-in-life action boom. Kind of mirrors Liam Neeson's action career, actually, in the 2010s. Kind of a similar trajectory, although Charles Bronson wasn't in as many like dramatic roles as Liam Neeson was in his earlier career. Bronson...
Yeah.
What was that, Mike?
I was just laughing at the idea of Bronson being in, like, Oscar reviews and stuff.
Like, imagine Schindler's List starring Charles Bronson. It's a different movie.
Yeah.
Maybe a better movie, but it's a different movie. No, Bronson tended to work with a lot of the same people during this time period, too, including director Michael Winner, who made Death Wish, and director J. Lee Thompson, who would go on to direct 9 Charles Bronson films in total, but who began his collaboration with the actor in 1976's St. Ives.
You function strictly as a go-between.
For which I'll get paid?
10,000, cold cash.
Charles Bronson is St. Ives.
What are the odds in a Rams-Dallas game?
He'll bet on anything,
Okay, 500.
even his life.
I'm gonna take you out. Go between.
You don't like me, do you?
I don't like your questions. For you, you're tough, smart. You got a lot of great-looking bits and pieces.
St. Ives, a go-between who knows the places to find the people who have the answers.
10,000.
An honest man goes to the police. A dishonest man
Settles the score in his own way.
20,000.
I don't want to be an accessory.
100,000.
And don't move.
As the stakes go up, the odds go down.
Every time we find a stiff, you're around. Now, why is that?
I guess I'm just lucky.
You know something? You're all right.
Did you have any doubts?
He's clean. He's mean. He's a go-between.
All right, now St. Ives was based on a novel from 1972 called The Propane Chronicle, and was originally being developed by director Dick Richards, who around this time also made Farewell My Lovely, a Philip Marlowe detective story starring Robert Mitchum, which shares a lot of DNA with this one, actually. It took a little time to get made, and at one point the studio was looking at either Steve McQueen or Marlon Brando to take on the role, which if you look at, especially Marlon Brando in the 70s, that's a weird choice for this movie.
Yeah.
This is post-Godfather Marlon Brando we're talking about here. But eventually it came together with Charles Bronson and with J. Lee Thompson, who ended up with a working relationship that would last throughout these 70s and 80s. J. Lee Thompson was a prolific filmmaker for 4 decades, with a couple of all-time classics to his name, like The Guns of Navarone, the original Cape Fear. He also made Conquest and Battle for the Planet of the Apes, which are the 4th and 5th ones. So, hey, that's cool. And he also made
how about that?
And he made a movie in the 80s that you talked about in our first bonus episode of Mike Go to the Movies that we did last week, Mike. Happy Birthday to Me,
Yes.
I believe was the name of it.
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
I think it was 81 or something like that it came out.
Something
It was
like that.
A fun little mean giallo movie.
Right, like a Canadian slasher thing going on. But his work with Bronson would pretty much define the later years of his career, and it all started right here with St. Ives, the story of a former crime reporter who takes on a job to recover some stolen papers before getting deeper into a criminal enterprise. It's one of several movies in the mid-70s that were made as a response to the success of Roman Polanski's Chinatown, which had been released 2 years earlier. A lot of movies like readaptations of Raymond Chandler novels and things like that all kind of came in the wake of Chinatown. Now, Jeff Goldblum shows up very briefly as Hood number 3 in a scene where he and 2 other guys, one of which I'm going to get to in a minute, get into a fight with Charles Bronson, and Bronson beats the shit out of them. And that's pretty much Goldblum's entire role in this movie. We can just close up shop right now. This is the end of the episode. Now, Bronson plays the titular crime reporter, St. Ives, Raymond St. Ives, to be exact, which is a great name. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
Every time somebody in the movie is like, "Hey, St. Ives, what are you doing here?" He's like, "Yes, I am St. Ives," and that's word for word verbatim dialogue from the movie, I'm sure.
Basically.
He gets involved with a scheme led by Abner Procane, played by John Houseman, an Oscar winner a couple of years earlier for The Paper Chase, and who produced a lot of Orson Welles' early work, including a little movie called Citizen Kane. You might have heard of it. Oh, you're not familiar? Okay. Also in the mix is Janet, a woman with a mysterious past, who's played by Jacqueline Bisset, known for her roles in films like Bullet, Airport, Day for Night, and Sidney Lumet's Murder on the Orient Express. From there, Maximilian Schnell, another Oscar winner for Judgment at Nuremberg, plays Dr. Constable, Abner Procane's therapist. He also receives special guest star credit in the opening credits, as if this were like a TV pilot. It was very strange. Which honestly, the movie kind of feels like it could be like the pilot to an ongoing series of St. Ives Adventures or something like that.
Yeah,
So I mean,
I didn't really think of that.
Yeah, I mean, it was,
but it definitely has those vibes.
Yeah, it was released in theaters, I'm pretty sure, and like it came out as a movie. But it just seems like if it had been reworked into like a 60-minute thing, could have been a pilot to a TV show. The 2 detectives who keep running into St. Ives, Aller and Deal, are played by Harris Yulin and Harry Guardino. Yulin's known for Scarface and Ghostbusters 2, while Guardino is known for Dirty Harry. Dana Elcar, who played MacGyver's boss on MacGyver, plays a guy named Blunt. John Stedman from The Hills Have Eyes plays Willie, and Michael Lerner, who I love and who gives an all-time performance in Barton Fink, one of my favorite movies of all time, plays Myron Green, St. Ives' lawyer, who's in the opening scene. And finally, showing up alongside Goldblum as they try to mug St. Ives, Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger himself, appears as Hood number 1. He is the leader of the hoods that try to take down Charles Bronson. Hood number 2, some other guy. But Hood number 1, Robert Englund. Hood number 3, Jeff Goldblum.
Man, what a terrible fate for Hood number 2.
To be the forgotten
that
Hood.
other guy.
The forgotten Hood. Hood number 2. We should do a podcast about that guy, whoever he is.
I'm in.
Now, St. Ives was written by Barry Beckerman, who was also a producer on the original Red Dawn, and it was directed by J. Lee Thompson, whose previous film was a TV movie called Widow, which aired earlier that year, and who would next direct another Charles Bronson film, 1977's The White Buffalo, a sort of retelling of Moby Dick, where Bronson plays Wild Bill Hickok on the hunt for a white buffalo, who teams up with Crazy Horse, played by Will Sampson, who is chief in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Mike, I need to watch this movie immediately.
Holy shit. That sounds incredible.
Yeah, Charles Bronson in chief doing Western Moby Dick. I'm so there. According to Wikipedia, St. Ives was released on July 31st, 1976, but according to IMDb, it was released on September 1st. So no real clear date, but sometime in 76 this movie came out. And if you weren't seeing it, then just a few weeks earlier, you could have caught the release of The Shootist, which was the final film starring John Wayne, which is great. Or Gator with Burt Reynolds also came out around the same time, which is very memorably referenced on Archer, among other things. And the IMDb plot synopsis for St. Ives reads, a crime novelist is hired by a shady character to negotiate the return of stolen confidential documents. So, Mike, going into St. Ives, what were your thoughts going in, and what did you think of the movie? What were your overall thoughts on St. Ives?
So on the way in, we talked about, Happy Birthday to Me on the last Mike and Mike bonus episode. I was feeling pretty high about my expectations for St. Ives. I had a lot of fun with that movie, so I was excited to see if there was some roots of Happy Birthday to Me in St. Ives, and there is a tiny little bit. There's a couple of little nods to that style, like the black gloved killer kind of deal thing. But overall, St. Ives is like mostly kind of fine. I don't know. I sort of enjoyed it. I rated it 2.5 out of 5 on Letterboxd. I feel like 3 is like my default, like, yes, this is fine kind of thing. And so a little more on the negative. I don't know if I would recommend it to people that they need to see St. Ives exactly, but it wasn't bad, if that makes any sense. It kind of just moses along as a little, beat for beat, like private detective crime story, and that's fine. I enjoy that for the most part. It kind of picks up towards the last 20 minutes where like stuff starts happening and like we have a plan and there's a lot of moving parts that like we're down. Anytime somebody's like got a plan down to the 25 seconds, like they're they're got a stopwatch and everything's timed to that precise level. That's fun. So there's a whole sequence about that I'm sure we'll get into. But overall, meh, I don't know. I was kind of over it.
I get where you're coming from. I think this is the weakest movie we've covered so far, but I had fun. I gave it a 3 out of 5 on Letterboxd, so a little bit higher than you, I guess. But yeah, I thought it was solid. Good enough time. I think it is again weaker than the other Goldblum movies we've talked about so far, and we even mentioned in our last episode the real strength of Jeff Goldblum's early career is that he was in a lot of really good movies when he was just popping up as a random extra kind of thing. And this isn't as good as those movies. It's not even as good as Death Wish, but it's fun. It's a good time. I feel like I've liked it just on the basis of I enjoy watching complicated mystery movies, and I like watching Charles Bronson, and this scratched a lot of those itches. It's not doing anything exceptionally well, but it hits enough of my buttons where I'm like, yeah, all right, St. Ives, I'm in. This is it feels like they dropped Charles Bronson into the middle of a Raymond Chandler novel. And it's one of those things that does not feel like it should work, but it kind of does. He's fun. He's a good time in the movie. It's him playing I think a much different version of the same character, I guess, that he normally plays in the 70s and 80s. He feels different than Paul Kersey in Death Wish. But at the same time, it's still Charles Bronson, and he's still just kind of doing the same kind of leery, tough guy stare and the same kind of one-liners and things like that. But it's a different sort of version of that character, which I appreciated at least.
Yeah, it is kind of fun to see this movie, St. Ives, back-to-back with Special Delivery. Well, not back-to-back, but you know what I mean. To pair up the two different versions of the 70s leading man tough guy thing with Bo Svensson and Charles Bronson, even though they're kind of the exact same thing where they're just two hunky dudes that are completely confident in their ability to just survive whatever's happening. And that's basically their only character trait, which is fine. That's fun.
Yeah, I'm with you there. But yeah, so Special Delivery, awesome. This movie, not as good.
Yeah,
But yeah, I really did enjoy the movie. To an extent, like it's good enough. Basically, like I didn't hate the fact that I had to watch this movie. And so far, I haven't hated any of the movies that we talked about. I've really liked most of the movies we talked about actually on this podcast so far. So it's a weird thing where like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, I guess, because after doing the Nicolas Cage podcast for so long, it's one of those things where like for a long time we were getting nothing but bad movies. And so here I'm like waiting and it's like it's got to happen at some point, but hopefully not for a while. But I did enjoy this, and Jeff Goldblum, of course, gets one scene in the movie. What did you think of Jeff Goldblum in his one scene in St. Ives, Mike?
I sort of feel like this is the least he gets to do, even though he was only in about 5.5 seconds of California Split. I feel like he gets nothing to really do in this little fight scene. Like he's not Hood number one. Like he doesn't get the most prominent feature as the thug guy, which is funny that I didn't realize it was Robert Englund until after the movie.
Oh, really?
That I like was looking around and I was like, oh shit, that's him. Yeah.
Yeah. I realized it was him. I mean, I knew he was in the movie. I knew he played the thugs or whatever. Like I knew he was one of those guys, but I recognized him immediately because I just watched a Galaxy of Terror from 1981, which was an Alien ripoff that came out like right after Alien, and Robert Englund is in that, and it's like right before he was Freddy Krueger. And it's a few years after this movie came out, so it's like he looks basically the same.
That's funny. But yeah, back to Goldblum. He's fine. Like he gets he's fine. There's like one kind of really funny moment where they like lead St. Ives up this elevator or whatever, and he St. Ives like falls. I don't even really know exactly what happens, but he almost falls down the elevator shaft. Or he does fall down the elevator shaft.
He does fall down the elevator shaft. Yeah, it's a great scene. I actually really like that whole scene.
And he grabs Goldblum's character's leg, Hood number 3's leg, to like save himself, and Goldblum is just like like screaming the top of his lungs. And that was very funny.
Yes.
But kind of after that, there's not much happening for Hood number 3. I mean, it's fine. He's good. He's good what he's doing, but I wish he was there more.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I can tell, Goldblum does not really have any dialogue in this movie. As compared, the other two Hoods get to speak, and Goldblum's kind of like there, and it's weird. Like he's like, I feel like it's different than his character in Death Wish. I feel like Death Wish was like, he seems more menacing in that movie, whereas this one, he like because we're obviously like looking for Goldblum, we're looking at him, and like his face just looks like what am I doing here? Like he's not really comprehending the scene he's in, even though he's played it like 3 or 4 times before in other movies at this point.
Yeah.
Or at least between Death Wish and Special Delivery. But yeah, so he gets this one scene. As far as I can tell, no dialogue. He does get to scream a little bit during that elevator shaft thing, which is like probably my favorite action beat of the movie, where they like knock him down, and Charles Bronson's like holding onto the ropes of the elevator, and then they go in the elevator and it's coming down, and he's like, "Oh no!" and all that stuff, and he's trying to pull Jeff Goldblum down with him. That's pretty great. And then of the 3 guys, I mean, Robert Englund's like the clear leader of the gang. He does the most talking. I think Jeff Goldblum does get the most memorable moment in the fight, though. Other than the elevator shaft, which is probably the best scene. At this point, Bronson has knocked out Robert Englund and the other guy, and Jeff Goldblum shows up with a razor, and he's like closing in on him, like, "Ooh, I have a razor."
Yeah.
And Bronson's like, "Oh, no, you don't," and he just punches him or whatever.
Yeah, just one punch and he's out.
Yeah, I mean, he knocks them out really quick, and the ending of the movie too. It solves itself really fast. I feel like.
Yeah.
The guy, we'll get to it later on, but like at the end of the movie, the guy like comes up to him with a gun, and Bronson like pushed him into a pool, and that's basically the end. That's all it takes.
Yep, just throw him in the pool.
Yeah, that all works out. But yeah, so how do you think this role fits into the roles that we've seen Jeff Goldblum play so far, Mike?
I mean, the freak number 1 is the most obvious connection. Another Hood character, Charles Bronson, revenge vehicle.
Yep.
Who doesn't love it? Special delivery. That's great.
Sure.
We got him being another street thug guy. It's going to be really fun to try to connect, I think, these future movies or these movies, like this first 6 movies, to anything that comes after them, because he's just being a street thug. Yeah. And once he's not, it's going to be fun to try to work these back into the conversation.
Right. Yeah, we're going to keep having to refer back to the Jeff Goldblum Street Thug trilogy. between Death
it.
Wish, Special Delivery, and St. Ives. But yeah, we've seen him do similar stuff in those movies, obviously. Although this one does not have any sexual assault in his part, so that's a plus.
Hey, moving on up.
There we go. It's also the second movie we've seen where he doesn't have any dialogue, just like Nashville. Although Nashville, he's actually like a character throughout the movie. You know, like he's like he's there. He's a presence. He's he has mannerisms and things like that. This he's there. He screams a little bit. And like we mentioned in the last episode, Next Up Greenwich Village features Goldblum as an actor trying out for a tough guy part like this one. And that's still, I think, the best performance we've seen from him in these early episodes of the podcast. Yeah. Just, because that's the only one where he gets to actually play a real character, I guess. It's the only one where he has, like, 2 scenes with extended dialogue bits in them. And he's, like, talking and conversing and all that stuff. And he has funny moments and things. And here he's, doing the same thing he did in Death Wish, doing the same thing he did in Special Delivery. And, I enjoy watching that because it's Jeff Goldblum, and it's like a weird thing to see him as like an extra in this movie, essentially.
Yeah.
But I'm ready to move on from that stuff. Hopefully, we're moving into 1977 next, and I know he has Annie Hall's coming up, and I know he's literally in like one scene of that movie and has one line of dialogue. So there is that. But it's a very iconic line of dialogue. It's a very well known line that he has. And then there's the Sentinel, which I have not seen. I believe he's a pretty small role in that movie too. And then there's a movie called Remember My Name. Which I believe is entirely on YouTube, by the way, if anybody wants to go watch it. I actually looked that up. And that one looks like he has a pretty major supporting role in that. So I'm really curious to find that one. And just like eager, even if the movie's not good, I'm just eager to like get a full Jeff Goldblum performance, I guess.
Yeah,
because we
need some more substantial stuff.
It's really hard to host a podcast about Jeff Goldblum and then talk about movies that Jeff Goldblum is in for 30 seconds. Is all I'm saying.
But we're doing a great job, Mike.
Oh yeah, I mean we're killing it. We're crushing it, Mike. We've exceeded expectations at every turn. Now what are the moments or scenes in St. Ives that stood out to you, Mike?
Well, one, I just want to talk about Dr. Constable, which one, funniest name of all time.
I kept calling him Constable Johnstable, which I can't remember if that was a Mystery Science Theater reference or a Comedy Bang Bang reference, but either way,
I'm in. Yeah, whatever it is,
pretty much.
And he's got like the mustache that's like, or like the beard that's no chin, like the Civil War general mustache, like beard thing going on that just connects to the sideburns.
Right, and as soon as that actor is in the like I said, he's a special guest star, Maximilian Schnell. And as soon as it said that, I was like, well, he's got to be the bad guy. There's no way that he's not.
I didn't put that together. He just, as soon as he showed up, I was like, how is Sacha Baron Cohen in this movie? Like, I don't understand.
What kind of time travel trickery?
Yeah, he's got this weird accent that I was like, it's Sacha Baron Cohen. That's it.
Yeah, no, it is. I did enjoy Constable Johnstable. I thought he was a lot of fun. It's Maximilian Schnell, who's a very good German actor. Just kind of going a little bit big and over the top with that role. I mean, the scene towards the end where the thing unveils, like the movie screen moves like off to the side, and he's just sitting there in the silhouette with the gun pointed. Like it's perfect. Bad guy.
Incredible.
It's great. It's perfect over the top.
It's like it's a Bond villain reveal.
It is. It really is. No, Dr. St. Ives, I expect you to die. Doesn't have the same ring to it.
No, it doesn't.
But I do want to mention, we mentioned that he has a special guest star credit in the opening thing. Goldblum's name appears in the credits this time, which I think it also did in Special Delivery. I think we mentioned that in that episode. Again, just to, it's one of those things where I was looking out for that in those early movies where it's like those opening credits come through and like Goldblum's name is not in them. And this one, even though he's in less of this movie than like his name is not in the credits from Next Up Greenwich Village, but it is in the credits for this movie. But he's in much less of this movie than he is in Next Up Greenwich Village. It's very strange, very weird. So good for him. Got his name in the credits. Movie opens with Michael Lerner from Barton Fink popping up for one scene, who is so great. Like I really just enjoyed his character, like just popping in and doing like this big kind of lawyer thing. I sort of wanted the movie to be about his frazzled lawyer character. And he's coming in telling Charles Bronson like, hey, money and things like that. I don't even know what he was talking about.
Just lawyer stuff.
Pretty much. I think he's saying like, I got a job for you. And he's like, I think he's the one that tells him to go to Avenue Propane or whatever. And like Charles Bronson says something like, oh, so you're saying I could murder anybody? And he's like, as your lawyer, I would advise against it, and all that kind of stuff. There's like, fun, snappy noir dialogue throughout this movie that I really enjoyed. But it's Charles Bronson delivering a lot of it too, so it's just like it's a lot slower than I think normal noir dialogue would be. I just recently rewatched Double Indemnity, which is such a quick-paced movie. And you know, it's similar. It's a similar kind of aesthetic with this one, where it's trying to do the neo-noir detective sort of thing, but like it's Charles Bronson, and he's great. I really enjoy watching him in this movie, but it is just like him being like, "Hey, I'm Charles Bronson," and you know, doing that like low Charles Bronson voice the entire time.
I want to just keep doing Charles Bronson movies so you can keep doing your Simpsons Charles Bronson voice.
Yes,
because it's so good.
That is my Charles Bronson voice filtered through The Simpsons. Honestly, I mean, we could just pivot, get rid of the Jeff Goldblum podcast, go to the Charles Bronson, the Charles Bronson podcast.
Oh man,
I wouldn't say no. I think it'd be a lot of fun. But yeah, so then we're introduced to Abner Propane. He's watching a silent film in his house, which is a recurring theme throughout the movie, where like his Dr. Constable Johnstable is talking to Bronson and be like, "Oh, movies are like the dreams of the mind," or something.
Who knows what he
says? He says something along those lines where it's like, "Films represent dreams," or whatever. But anyway, it doesn't really like mean anything. I feel like whatever he's saying, it's just kind of like an added thing, and it's like an extra kind of detail to Procane's character that he just really likes watching old movies in his like kind of basement or whatever. But yeah, what do you think of that whole sequence where he like first meets Abner Propane and Janet and like everything going on with those characters?
Yeah, I thought that was such a nice, like, I guess like Raymond Chandler or just like hard-boiled crime touch, where like this kind of like, you know, low down detective guy, investigator person gets brought into this like, you know, big weird West Hollywood Hills like super rich eccentric person plot. You know, like in Chinatown, which I guess now makes a lot of sense. I never thought of it that way. But that happens in a lot of those stories. But yeah, and I also wished I recognized what movie was playing. I just felt like it might have been important for some reason.
Movie, he mentions the movie was called The Big Parade, which I have not seen.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know if it does have any kind of secret symbolism to the movie or whatever. I've never seen The Big Parade. I don't know. But yeah, so you're introduced to Propane, you're introduced to Janet, who's like the femme fatale of the movie. And then they kind of ask Bronson to recover some stolen documents for them, basically. And they give him a briefcase filled with $100,000. And then Bronson, I guess, stops or he's going to the laundromat, which is where he's supposed to make the handoff. And when he's there, he discovers a dead body in the dryer, which is honestly like a very shocking image when you see it for the first time. Yeah. You know, it's because it's just the guy's head in the dryer kind of on the spin cycle doing its thing. And so, you know, he opens it and the body kind of flops out and the one cop is like, "Hey, what'd you do?" And they think Bronson did it. I mean, and there's a couple of scenes like that throughout the movie where like every time Bronson discovers a dead body, it is like kind of shocking, but also kind of hilarious, like at the same time.
What about the note I wrote down when it happens the second time when he's at the hotel and the guy falls out the window or whatever? My note was that this could easily be like a comedy if it wasn't being serious about anything. Because I actually happened to watch the last half of Fish Called Wanda on HBO right after we did our episode where you talked about it on Mike and Mike.
Yeah.
And all I could think about was Michael Palin trying to kill the woman and just kept killing her dog instead. And that's what I kept thinking of was this is Charles Bronson trying to give somebody money and they just keep dying. And it seemed like a very easy pivot from, you know, murder crime story to comedy.
Yeah. It's actually really funny. When I watched A Fish Called Wanda, I was theoretically watching it with my girlfriend, but she fell asleep pretty quickly. And so I was watching it on my own. And then after the movie, I was like describing it to her. And I was like, "Oh man, it was so funny. He accidentally kept killing her dogs." And she was like, "Why is that funny? That sounds horrible." And I was like, you had to be there. Yeah, you had to be there. It's really great. It's really good. Fish Called Wanda. Go check it out if you haven't seen it. It's great. Arrow Video Blu-ray. I think it's on HBO Go also.
Yep.
But anyway, yeah. So Bronson's carrying $100,000. He discovers the dead body, and the cops bring him in for questioning. And he has one of my favorite one-liners right here in the movie where he's talking about like where he got the money and he lies about it. And it's like, "Oh, an old lady gave it to me on the streets," and you know, or something like that, or like an old lady needed to have him transfer it or whatever. And they're like, "Oh, well, are we gonna get the money?" And Bronson, as he's walking away, is like, "Well, you wouldn't steal from an old lady, would you?" And, you know, it's good snappy, you know, comebacks and stuff like that. You know, it's like I would really love to see like an actual traditional film noir from the 40s that just had Charles Bronson in it somehow. I think it'd be great. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
There's my favorite while we're on the topic of one-liners is a little bit later on after he figures out one of the guys that might be involved with the whole thing, and they're at that like weird lunch counter restaurant thing, and he buys him the dinner and all this stuff, and he's talking to him, and he's like, using the like as a way to like grill him about what's going on, and he goes, oh, by the way, happy birthday, and the character's like, oh, it's not my birthday, and he goes, then why'd I buy you dinner? And he gets up and walks away. Perfect.
That's great. Yeah, I was a big fan of that one too. I actually just really like the restaurant they hang out in. Like I just
I want to go there. It looks really cool.
A good buffet restaurant. There's a guy with an eye patch hanging out in the background, just like special delivery.
I thought of that.
So we had that going for it too. Good stuff. But anyway, so after that whole sequence with the dryer and the going to the police station, Janet shows up in Bronson's room. Bronson lives in a hotel, by the way. He lives in a hotel room, and he pops in like every day, and the clerk's like, "Hey, Charles Bronson or St. Ives or whatever your name is." And
that guy, real quick, because I wanted to mention him. I had to look up his name. It's Alicia Cook Jr., who is in a million of those detective story movies.
Really?
You would absolutely, yeah. He was in The Killing, the Stanley Kubrick one. The one that I recognize him from is also Stranger on the Third Floor. Oh. But he's in all those kind of like, he's just got like that big wide-eyed, like man over his head kind of look. And he plays that character in every one of them.
Yeah.
So that was a nice touch.
That's great. Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And he's kind of playing that character here, but he's like the incompetent hotel clerk who's like falling asleep on the job and that kind of thing. There's like the one scene where there's a shootout in the hotel lobby, and like and then somebody shoots at Charles Bronson, he like kind of ducks behind the thing, and the guy runs away, and then after all this stuff happens, like the hotel clerk is like in this chair and he wakes up and is like, oh, what's going on, you need your hotel key? But yeah, so Janet shows up in Bronson's room, and they kind of flirt for a little bit, and there's like the one line where like he's like, well, I work at night and I'm too tired in the mornings, and it's like, what about afternoons? Like, afternoons are perfect. And then later on that pays off when they sleep together, and she like takes off her robe, and she's like, it's afternoon, ho ho. Which that sequence, by the way, was maybe the hardest to laugh throughout the movie, because there's she takes off her robe, she says it's afternoon, smash cut to fireworks.
Yes.
You mentioned in our special delivery episode the panda fireplace, and how that movie like subverted it a little bit by like panning to the mailbox that was like the center of the action, and this movie like just destroys that entirely.
It's so good.
There's zero subtlety involved. Just smash cut to fireworks, and that turns out to be just another movie that Abner Procane's watching in his like basement or whatever. But I love that. That was great, because then I also like that it turned out to be a movie, because like, why would there have been fireworks going on at that exact moment? Who does fireworks in the afternoon?
Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah, that was pretty great. I think also made my favorite like cool Bronson moment, like my favorite like kind of moment where he's acting like a badass, is where he implies he's gonna bribe the hotel clerk to find out where Jimmy Pesco is, and he kind of like opens up his wallet, and he's like, oh, how much do you think he's up there in the room for? And it's like, oh, it's in room 18 or whatever, and he closes his wallet and puts it back in his pants, and he's like, thanks, and he goes away. That was great. Yeah, just a fun little moment for Charles Bronson there.
Yeah, there's a couple of things like that where we get to see him. He goes to like that luggage store or whatever towards the beginning of the mystery, and the guy's like, "What are you, a cop?" And he just starts like interviewing him as if he was a cop,
right?
And like doesn't correct him kind of deal. And then he's like, "Oh, you can reach me at the Lido Hotel." And he's like, the guy's like, "Oh, you're not a cop, what?" And he's like, "That's it." And he walks out. I love how many reactions there are like that too, where it's just like, well, people getting mad at St. Ives for having that wily St. Ives. He pulled one over on me again.
That rascally St. Ives is at it again.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it seems like there's a lot of people that it seems like he's friends with, and then he's not actually friends with, and then they turn out to actually be friends. There's a scene where he goes to the garage, and the guy he's like, hey, check out this car. Bronson gets in the car, and the guy just starts blindly firing a machine gun at the car. And Bronson's like ducking and covering, and then at the end of it, and you think like, oh man, this is a dangerous guy. He must be trying to kill St. Ives. And then afterwards, he's like, oh man, this car's great, huh? Personal safety, very important. And it turns out they're pals, and then Bronson comes out and punches him in the face, and it's all a good laugh. But it's just like a weird scene that comes out of nowhere in the movie.
Yeah, I thought we took a hard left turn to a different movie at that point.
Yeah,
when they just light up this car.
And right before that scene, we should say, is the scene where he meets up with Goldblum in England and Hood number 2. and they do the whole kind of mugging thing, and they try to hold him up, and they're in the abandoned building and the elevator shaft scene, and the scene where he kind of beats them all up, and that's pretty much the end of Goldblum's role. I just wanted to throw it out there again because we are a Jeff Goldblum podcast. Just in case anybody's wondering why we're not talking about Goldblum, he is only in one scene of this movie and he doesn't talk. But yeah, and speaking and the smash cut to fireworks I mentioned, the smash cut also to Jimmy Pesco falling out the window was also very funny.
Yes. I don't know, Captain Kangaroo, smash cut to him falling out the window. Incredible.
Yep. And then the same cops who were there for the dryer thing, they show up. And there's one line there, I think it's Bronson who says this, where he's, they mention like, oh, maybe he had a hooker in the hotel room or whatever, or a whore, and Bronson's like, stop calling people whores, you're cops, Jesus, and he like walks away. And then Officer Fran, who was at the laundromat, pops up again just to say hello. He's like at the scene, he's like, oh, hey, St. Ives, I was Officer Fran, I was at the laundromat. He's like, okay. And that's pretty much it. And then I was really hoping that would just be it, like it was just like a one extra like little character moment where it's like, oh hey, Officer Fran, just wanted to say hi since I saw you.
Still around.
But then later on they actually like meet, and Officer Fran's trying to get in on the case, and then Officer Fran shows up dead, stabbed, and you don't know who did it. But you think it's the same guy who's killed those first two people, and then it turns out it's not. Twists and turns. But yeah, it's all leading up to the handoff at the drive-in, which is what you were talking about at the beginning of this podcast. That sequence, which starts to boil down to like 25 seconds on the clock. Let's go, and all that stuff. So what did you think of all that, Mike?
I feel like I somehow. So one of the things with this, while I was watching this movie, I was kind of like a little bit bored, just generally. So like I kept finding myself, looking at Twitter or something like that. So then we get to like the setup. We get to the drive-in and this whole thing that's, this whole deal gone wrong setup thing they did. So I kind of missed how and why we got there somehow. So because I remember there's something like, Bronson eventually gets the ledgers back and he reads the pages and he understands that, the guy is actually in on, some criminal activity and like runs a gambling ring or something.
Right.
And he's trying to set up these two guys, like this Arab dude and the oil sheik or something like that, to get $4 million. And it ends up being like they kind of plant this plan, like they let someone overhear what they're planning to do, I think, so that they'll rob them and then they can rob those guys.
Right.
I missed some specifics, I guess, but basically that whole plot at the drive-in was great when he's like, okay, in 35 seconds, he's on his stopwatch, the guy's car is going to pull in here, and then these guys are going to pull in here, and then we're going to cut them off here, and it's like a fun little like heist thing going on.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I was a little bit more engaged than you were, I think, but it's also just a really difficult movie to follow on a general plot level. Like I really had no idea what Bronson was trying to do with these two people, with Abner Propane and Janet. Like it's like he was doing jobs for them. I wasn't sure if like Bronson was like a criminal or like he was. I mean, he's a former crime reporter, and it seems like he's like dabbling in crime now. But he seems like he's not. He doesn't seem like a criminal. He seems like he's a detective trying to like figure out the case or whatever, even though he's just doing criminal jobs. I don't know. It handles it really weird. But it all leads up to this drive-in thing, and it's a fun sequence. I really enjoyed it. It kind of reminded me of the scene in Special Delivery, actually, where Graff is trying to break into the mailbox, and that kind of thing, and he's like turning the keys and everything. But yeah, it's the handoff at the drive-in. The two guys who betrayed them turn out to be the two cops that have been following Bronson the entire movie. So they were actually like the ones who were killing those first two guys anyway. Not Officer Fran, but they killed those first two guys, Boykins and Pesco, which are good,
great names.
Good names right there.
Hell yes.
And then they get there and they're still in their masks and stuff. They don't know who they are, but they are about to pull out their guns. And I think my favorite thing, Bronson, like his immediate reaction is to jump over the car in order to get to them, and Janet just like shoots them before he gets there, because obviously she does. Why is he jumping over the car in order to get them?
Like not over the hood, the entire
pull
car.
off their masks, and it's Deal and the other guy, Aller or whatever. But yeah, so it turns out to be those guys, but they did not kill Officer Fran. They're trying to figure out like, well, who did? And like it's kind of implied it was probably Janet. But the movie like heavily implies it. And then there's the dramatic reveal, as we talked about before, as the movie screen opens up to reveal Dr. Constable Johnstable, who is sitting with his legs crossed, his gun pointed out like every bad guy ever. And it turned out he was teamed up with Janet the whole time. They were double crossing Abner Propane and Charles Bronson, Raymond St. Ives. And, so there's this whole sequence, and then there's a gunfight, and they basically get away by pushing the doctor and Janet into a pool, and it's like that's the end of the movie. That's how it ends.
Yeah, great. He does kill the doctor.
He does kill the doctor. You're right, but then they kind of just push Janet into the pool, and then that's it. And then Bronson's pal Charlie shows up. Like he's the one who distracts her, and then she is able to get pushed in the pool, and then he puts the cuffs on her. And then the very end of the movie, Janet hits on him. Janet hits on him like, "Oh, hey, you use those handcuffs off there," or something like that. That's not the line, but no. And Bronson's basically just like, "Well, it's your problem now," and he walks away, and then the movie ends.
On a freeze frame. Now that I think about it, this might have been a TV pilot.
There's so many aspects of this movie that feel like if you cut it down like 30, if you cut 30 minutes off of it, which I think you could easily do, it could have been a pilot to a TV show. This could have been the ongoing Charles Bronson detective series that we've never had but always wanted in our lives, Mike.
This is what we were missing the whole time.
Apparently, yeah. But that is St. Ives. That's the entirety of the movie. I mean, all that stuff. I mean, any other thoughts on these things? What do you think of St. Ives and his relationship with Janet? These various double crossings that happened in the last 15 minutes, where it felt like everybody was double crossing everybody. I mean, what'd you think, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, well, one thing I want to mention is that it's another Lalo Schifrin score.
It is,
which was Special Delivery.
Yes, the guy who did the Mission Impossible theme song.
Yes, yeah, and you can definitely tell again also in this movie, like you could in Special Delivery. But this movie has this really fun thing where, the detective St. Ives is driving different places, and it'll just be like this banging score for 10 seconds, and then he gets to where he is, and it hard stop, and it's just hilarious that it keeps happening. But anyway, one of the things, one of the reviews I mentioned for Happy Birthday to Me when I watched it was that it had a Scooby-Doo ending, is how the person described it on Letterboxd.
Yeah.
And when this ending started, I was like, oh, it's another one of these, where it's just everybody like, ha ha ha, and everyone's got a gun somehow.
Right.
And it just feels like one of those kind of things where I don't know, what if this shit happened in the last 10 minutes? Yeah, okay, well, we're while they're writing it. Oh, what if this guy shows up? And then, that's fine. It's fun times.
Yeah, it's totally fine. It's, again, St. Ives, I think overall as an experience, it's fine. It's pretty good. I enjoyed it. I feel like your mileage may vary based on how much you enjoy 70s crime thrillers starring Charles Bronson,
Right.
If it scratches that itch for you, then you're going to enjoy the movie. I gave it 3 out of 5 in Letterboxd. You gave it 2.5. So you thought it was okay, right?
Yeah. I only rated it 2.5 because I don't feel comfortable being people probably should check this out. Because you probably shouldn't. Unless, like you said, it's that very specific thing that you're interested in.
Right. Yeah. And this one is a little bit more obscure, on the obscure side, a little bit tougher to get a hold of, but it's easier to find than Next Up Greenwich Village and Special Delivery. So it does have that going for it. It's
available to rent on Amazon right now.
Right.
So.
And it's available through a Netflix disc, which is how I watched it also. So a couple different ways you can watch St. Ives if you do want to watch it. Also wanted to give a quick shout out to the weird little comedy scene with the guys in the bathroom.
Oh, yeah.
Bronson needs to use the first stall to make the handoff for the money. And the guy comes out of the bathroom and is like, hey, you can use this stall if you want. He's like, no, I got to use the first one. I have a mental thing. And the guy kind of gives him a dirty look, like, what, my stall's not good enough for you? And then the guy in the first stall comes out and is like, hey, man, I went as fast as I could. I have the same thing at home. Yeah. All that stuff. Just very strange, very weird little extra thing going on there. But yeah, other final thoughts on St. Ives, Mike? Should we move on to Letterboxd reviews?
I mean, it's fine. It's overall, it's okay.
Yeah,
it does, that's where I'm at.
It's solid enough, basically. It does enough of a good job. It is the weakest movie we've talked about so far, but still, I enjoyed it. Had a good time. Let's see what the people have to say. Mike, on Letterboxd. Yes. First one, I got a 3-star review from Matt Gorley, who used to host the I Was There Too podcast. He's a comedian. And the reason I actually chose this one is because we were talking to our guest, Nick Wormuth, on Mike Might Go to the Movies a couple of weeks ago. Basically, our last guest before the big quarantine stuff started happening. And we were talking about this podcast, and we were like, oh, we're going to review St. Ives in a couple of weeks. And he was like, oh, man, Matt Gorley from I Was There Too. He's been obsessed with St. Ives forever, just because the poster is great. And so I actually went to Letterboxd and was surprised that he had finally watched it, because the way Nick had described it, Matt Gorley had never seen St. Ives. He just talked about it all the time. But in January 2020, just a couple of months ago, Matt Gorley watched the movie and rated it on Letterboxd. And this was his review. He said, I've been eyeing this one for a long time on the fact alone that the poster is so goddamn gorgeous. Didn't figure the film could ever live up to it, and even though it didn't, it had some style. Bronson remains an enigma to me. I can never quite figure out what his appeal is, and that somehow has become his appeal for me. I'm on a mission to find it? Question mark. Maybe it's the fact that I once passed up an opportunity to buy a velvet portrait of him in Ensenada. If that sounds like it could be the plot of this movie, it isn't. But the portrait thing is a true story and one that's somehow simpler yet more exciting than the film itself. But excitement is not what led me here. It was Bronson's 8-inch wide, 3mm tall mustache wisping in the wind over a commando casual turtleneck and lap-tight slacks. Got what I came for and a little more to boot. This thing has Jeff Goldblum and Robert Englund as bit part hoods. What a win! So that's from Matt Gorley, famed podcaster. Used to listen to Ives there too a lot. That was a great podcast. I wish he would bring that back at some point. Here's a 3-star review from Justin Liberty, who ran the Alamo Draft House in Yonkers back in the day. He works with Vinegar Syndrome now, and we used him in our last episode of this podcast too.
Friend of the show,
Justin Liberty, of course. We used him in the last episode, and I was thinking to myself, like, maybe I shouldn't use him again. But not a lot of people have reviewed these early movies on Letterboxd, Mike. But for some reason, Justin has. Here's a 3-star review, which reads, featuring Robert Englund and Jeff Goldblum, each cast as Hood, and getting dispatched by Bronson. Solid 70s whodunit is more playful than a lot of Charlie's other flicks, and it feels like Sherlock Holmes via someone like Don Siegel. Also, why is Goldblum always fucking with Bronson? It's a fair question to ask.
Yeah.
Here's a 4.5-star review from Eric Harvey. It reads, one of my top 5 Bronson films that always shoots to number 1 after I rewatch it. I haven't seen it in a few years, but I always think about it. I love that cafeteria he hangs at. I want a cafeteria like that here in town so I can go and drink beer out of a goblet with beans and knockwurst. What happened to this country?
I mean, I'm not saying I 100% want that in my life, but I 100% want that in my life.
Oh, yeah, especially after 2 weeks of quarantine. Yeah, we want that the cafeteria to drink beer out of a goblet with beans and knockwurst, for sure. Here's a 3.5-star review from Brian J. Tyranna Rabbit Wright, which reads, this feels like the pilot for the greatest 70s private eye TV series never made. It's got a great 70s noir tone, a breezy style that it doesn't lay it on too heavily, a few big laughs, and the cast is just loaded with 70s character actors who would generally migrate to TV in the 80s, in colorful little roles that I could easily see coming up again every week. Also, Jeff Goldblum playing, again, a nameless thug who tries to give Charles Bronson the business. The look on his face says it all. Oh god, no, it's him! And maybe that's what we were missing in this movie, Mike. Maybe if Jeff Goldblum was actually reprising his role from Death Wish.
Oh, man.
Maybe that's what actually was happening. And, he moved to L.A. after the sequence in Death Wish, and, he runs into Charles Bronson again, and he's like, oh, no, it's that guy under a different name or something. Could happen. Here's a 3-star review. This is the last one I have from Fred Palke. It says, viewed 42 years ago. I have not seen it since. Only remember that I have a good attitude towards this one. I do not own it.
What a pleasant outlook on life.
Yeah, I watched it 42 years ago. I remember it being pretty good. Sure, why not? Yeah, so that is St. Ives. And yeah, solid enough. Good time. I enjoyed watching it. But I think we're ready to be done with this one, Mike, and move on to the next one. So where can we find you online this week, Mike?
You can find me at MD Film Blog on Twitter and Letterboxd.
And you can find me at M Smith Film Blog on Twitter, Mike Smith Film on Letterboxd, and Radio Mike Sandwich on Instagram. Thanks for listening to The Complete Works. I'm Mike Smith. That's Mike DeCriscio. Don't forget to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or any other podcast app. And if you want to contact us, hit us up at jeffgoldblumcompleteworks@gmail.com. And you can find the rest of our podcast on Rapture Press alongside the Review Zoo, which is a podcast about comic books and movie news and all that nerdy stuff. And you can follow this podcast on Twitter at GoldblumPod. Our theme song was created by Kyle Cullen, and our logo was designed by Jacob Honeycutt, or at Jacob Honey on Twitter. And you can join us next week on The Complete Works, where we're talking Goldblum's role in 1977's The Sentinel, which is a horror movie that reunites him with Death Wish director Michael Winner. So I'm looking forward to that one. Have not seen it. It's kind of a cult classic. It has a Scream Factory Blu-ray in case you want to expedite some shipping over to your house, Mike.
Oh boy, the wheels are turning.
There you go. And we're putting out bonus episodes of Mike and Mike Go to the Movies while the quarantine is going on, so check those out too. So thanks so much for listening, guys, and remember to go for the Goldblum.